Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RIFFHARD podcast. My guests today are the legendary Dave Ellefson and Guilherme Miranda from the band Dieth. Now, I know I'm in a band called Dieth, who has covered a band called Dieth. This is neither of them. This is Dave Ellefson's new band. Super stoked to have talked to him. It was a really great conversation. Here goes. David Ellefson and Guilherme, welcome to the RIFFHARD podcast.
Good to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Anytime. I'm curious about something, and I'm sure you've all noticed this, but usually there's exceptions. But usually, when you take multiple people who have already been in bands and you put them together, the result often sucks. Like it just does. I mean, straight up, it just does. Every once in a while, it comes out good. Every once in a while, like it stands on its own, like beyond just the fact that the people in it have a history or whatever. So what I'm curious is, in your opinions, why do most quote unquote super groups, why are they not considered real bands? And what's the difference? Like, what do you think makes it work when it does work?
Well, look, pretty much everybody in my phone book is famous because we all grew up together, right? And at one point we weren't famous because we were just the new guys coming up, right? So when I call someone to like play a solo or do something like that, it's probably someone you've heard of, and that doesn't mean it's a super group. That just means, I trust him because he's made a lot of records. He's a professional, and that's who I want to work with. Mm-hmm. I think I'm kind of past working with the amateur phase, So when I got the email from Guilherme, his name, his reputation, and his discography spoke for itself. I'm like, that's a good name to put in the phone book. There's a guy that's I'd probably trust him. He knows what he's doing. Same with Mihal. So with this wasn't a, concerted effort to put together a super group. I think, and I'll let Guilherme answer as well, but, I think Guilherme was looking to restart his musical life, his next chapter. I'd already been down these roads a few times in my life and my career. So when I got the email from someone else looking to do it, I'm like, hey, I've already done that. I know how this is done. And so for me, part of me was kind of like, sure, man, stand next to a brother who's wanting to, get started on the second act of his life and his career. And, I'm always down with that. And probably first before that is, hey, let me hear the song. And when he sent me the song, I'm like, this is fucking cool, man. And probably what was most challenging for me was like, where the hell is he putting his fingers on the fingerboard? Like, I've never heard, chord shapes and voicings like this, and we're talking about In the Hall of the Hanging Serpents, So for me, there was this intrigue about it that I think led to us just kind of taking it one phase at a time, finish one song, do a video, put it out, see how it responds. And, so for us, this whole thing was very organic. I do agree that when you just take a bunch of names and throw them into a pot and try to make celebrity soup, it usually is kind of yucky, So we did not do that here. That's not what our story is. So our story is three lads from different countries and different cultures and three different walks of life, all sort of being on a similar path, and kind of how the powers that be brought the three of us together. So that's our story.
And I think one interesting thing, just to add to what David said, because I agree 100% with him, but we had a call right before he took his flight to Gdansk, before I flew from here to Gdansk to record in the Hall of the Hanging Serpents. And we had this discussion briefly. We were like, man, is this going to be a collab, a super group? Are we going to record this video, like in a pro way or whatever? And then we got to a conclusion like, in life, everything depends on your posture. If we act like a project, we're going to be a project. If we act like a super group, it's super group. And then David said, man, let's be a band. If we act like a band, then we're a proper band, and then we took it from there.
I mean, you basically are what you say you are, I think.
And, yeah. And then we decided to be a band, like to do things together, to write songs together.
I think that's I think you guys nailed it. I think my theory on the difference is that you know someone for the band they got known for, right? And whatever band that is went through a very organic phase, obviously, and they had chemistry, probably went through members that they didn't have chemistry with, and eventually over many years you ended up with what you know. And with, I think, super groups, you get people who they're great musicians most of the time, but the chemistry thing hasn't had time to really play itself out. Like, just because they're great doesn't mean that everyone's gonna be speaking the same language musically. So I think that people will jump into bed together too fast musically, whereas the bands they're known for took a long time. It sounds to me like, yeah, you guys hit it right on the head. It's taking it organically, step at a time, and really, really getting it right.
Well, and the other thing about it is the songs. Are the songs any good? Because at the end of the day, once people buy the album because it's got some sticker on it that says, featuring so-and-so, and that's just all marketing is all that is, right? And so once you hear it, I mean, that stands the test of time, and look, I've done quite a few things outside of, the band I'm probably most known for. And people have kind of become accustomed to it. And some of them were just, hey, I'm here, I'm a member amongst members. Other times, Metal Allegiance, it was intentionally a supergroup. It was a pulling together of all the brothers and sisters of our community, even, I did Ellefson No Cover record. That was during COVID. I called everyone up and said, hey, our tours are canceled. We're off the road indefinitely. Let's record. Let's keep our nose up. Let's keep creating. Let's do something, made a super fun record, just to be, of cover songs. So, these things come in a variety of shapes and sizes. I think what's different about this one is this was a very clear, intentional reset and new path. And that had a whole different ring to it for me. And learning about, Guilherme's, his history where things left off with Entombed, A.D. and whatnot. And Mihal, we're just kind of where we all were. And it's interesting that it was January 2022. So new year, new month, new beginning, like it was all new, right? And meeting new friends. And I think, when we got together, we recorded the song, we mixed it. I was literally outside on my patio out here, and Guilherme and I were talking, and he says, man, this sounds great. Let's do some more. And, the answer is sure. Why not? We've got success with one. It sounds pretty good. And then when we got together in Gdansk to shoot the video, that was the first time we'd been in the room together. And I'm glad we did it quickly on song one, because, so many of these internet records, and with digital, and I love digital recording, I really do. But the one thing about it is you can make damn near anything sound awesome. And so when we got in a room together, we got to look each other in the eyes, sit down, break bread, hang out, do photos together, and, really feel like, I don't know, how do we look? Does this look like we're in a band, or does this look like we've been photoshopped together to make a photo? And again, keep in mind, we were coming out of COVID, and so this was like, yeah, we are sick of this shit. I mean, we are ready to freaking get in a room and throw down and be a rock band. And so I think it was just this perfect alignment of moment in time for this thing to really, hit its proper downbeats and really be a nice reset musically for all three of us together.
I'm curious about the reset idea, just because it's kind of personal to me, because my band Dieth took 12 years off, and I stopped playing when I started my companies. And then at the end of 2021, just changed my mind and started it up again. But it's with a mostly new lineup. And I've noticed that at the beginning, and I'm curious if you've both experienced this, at the beginning, I guess because so much time had elapsed and people got used to a certain lineup, they only saw it that way. So they only saw me inhabiting a certain position among those people, and they only saw the band Dieth as those people. And there was a lot of resistance to doing it differently, redefining what it means, redefining what it is. And I'm wondering if, with the two of you both having histories and known bands, basically going out there with a new one, basically that reset, was there resistance? Like, do you ignore that? What's your experience of that?
Man, I think that one of the things that is really cool is that all this process we've done in Gdansk, and then here talking about chemistry, sometimes you can't predict that, right? You know, the interaction, because the interaction in between people creates another thing, you know. So the interaction between us three creates the entity Dieth, you know. And then we've been through this whole process of being in hotel together, doing pictures together, recording the video, recording the song and stuff. And then once we're in a band, it's much more than just a working professional relationship. There's you're together the whole time, you know. So it's like I've been in bands and in tours that you wake up and you go to the hotel breakfast and you're like, oh man, I'm gonna sit with that guy, you know. And then in our case, I think it was cool because we were like, man, let's have an omelette together, yeah. And then everything had a good flow, which I think this was the lucky side of it, because we liked from the beginning to be near each other, you know. And I think that all these little small processes added to the whole organic feeling that everybody's getting this from being a band. And then going to that, from that to the reaction from people, you know, I think that I've been playing guitar on Entombed for many years and doing backing vocals, and I've done vocals in other bands and stuff. And many people were telling me, like, even LG actually, in some Entombed demos, I didn't have time to go to his place and record him, and he was calling me like, dude, put your vocal on the demos, pretend you were me, so we get something going, you know. So I think that at the end of the day, people wanted to see this. And when David started this band, playing something super heavy in another tuning, but with his whole bass, the clarity of his bass playing, of his bass tune, on something pretty much heavier, like according to the press, the heaviest thing that he has done. I think people were just thrilled by it because it became something new, something organic, and nobody complained, that at least that we've seen. Nobody came to us like, man, I would like to see you on that lineup doing that. You know, I think everybody was happy, like, yeah, man, you guys done something different, something new. It's fresh and sounds powerful. You know, it's organic. So that's the feedback we've got so far. You know,
once people hear the music, right? I think that's kind of the true test. I think resistance that people might have to something is because there hasn't been something new to change their perception yet. So they're even like, you know, if you have a new band, but you haven't put anything out yet, and you know, it's awesome, but nobody else does. They just know you for what you did in the past. Like they're not omniscient. So they have no way of understanding what's coming up. But I think that once the new music comes out and people are impressed with it and do love it, maybe are even surprised by it, then that's it. That's what you're defined as now. That's what you do now. I've noticed in the eyes of the public. And I'll say also, when I heard it, I was impressed and surprised. It's badass. I was really happy when I heard it, actually.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
So I'm curious about the writing process, because you were mentioning writing over the internet versus being in person. I've noticed that writing over the internet really does have a lot of advantages, because you don't have that problem of being in the room with somebody. It's so loud. You don't know if they're playing a note a half step off or something. Right. Like there's just you can't hear there. You can feel, but in the room is great for feel, but it's not great for like actually hearing details. And so the thing that internet or the home recording thing allows for is to really, really, really get granular and work out every last detail. I think the part that's missing sometimes is the feel aspect. It sounds like you guys took care of both.
Yeah, I mean, I think this went through two phases of writing. One was Guilherme sending over that first song in the Hall of the Hanging Serpents, and all of us rallying around that. And of course, he and Michal, can see each other in Poland. And as we talked, my first introduction was on the video shoot. But I can tell as soon as I watched Michal hit the drum, I knew that guy's a fucking great drummer. And every metal band is only as good as its drummer, period. Right?
Yes.
So, and
that's a fact.
So
Oh, yeah.
Right, that's a fact, right? So we got great riffs, and then can the drummer play? Oh yeah, you can play. All right, good. So that chemistry seemed to work, right? And we could hear musically it was working. But I think initially, and I deferred to Guilherme and still do as sort of the master composer of these songs. Like I send stuff over all the time, and this is my DAW right here, my iPhone. I literally set it up, and I'll riff through things, and I'll send it over. Hey guys, check it out. Like the other day, I think I sent over 3 new ideas that I had. It just came to me. I had a cup of coffee. Fuck it, I'm gonna write some riffs, and it's just a feeling. So I sent them over. We put them in a folder, and Guilherme's. Sort of the, he's our Mozart, he's the guy who, who sort of takes it all and puts it under his guys. And I've been in a band with a guy like that before, so it's not foreign to me, and I'm comfortable with it. And I like it because you can't have 3 chiefs all running around trying to be the boss. You just can't. Bands don't always work as with everything being democratic. And I think musically there needs to be a mastermind. I mean, I looked at that, one of my heroes, Steve Harris with Iron Maiden. There's always a guy who kind of defines it, and as much as it's collaborative and as much as we all share in the writing, I think for me, there came a point where I was, going, okay, either I'm going to just kind of play bass to Guilherme's songs, or maybe I should send some stuff over and get a feel for how my music fits inside of this band. And that was pretty early on, early in 2022. And I sent a folder of riffs over, and Guilherme, gave me the thumbs up, really liked it. We've since, incorporated some of that stuff. I would send over, like Heavy as the Crown is one I wrote it, and it's funny. I started playing a piano, right? It was just something, and I went, I can't finish it. So I picked up my guitar and I dropped it down into our tuning, and I was like, and then it worked, right? All of a sudden it was like, oh, this is cool. So I was excited, and I kind of wrote this melody, this vocal melody over top of it, and right away Guilherme and Michal are like, fuck, dude, you're singing this one. So next thing you know, I'm like, oh shit, now I became a singer. What the fuck? I should stop sending these guys riffs, So it just developed,
It sounds pretty organic. I'm curious about 2 things. Guilherme, when you're getting, so I guess if you're like the main writer guy, when it comes to getting ideas from other people, what's your process for incorporating them? You get ideas from someone and then try to work it into a song you already have, or get their ideas try to write around their ideas? Like, what's the process for you with that?
Man, actually, it works in many, many different ways. For example, for Don't Get Mad, Get Even, when David sent me that lyric, I had that riff in mind, that became the chorus for a long time. And then I don't know, I just read that phrase and it clicked on me like, man, that chord, that riff, that bar is going to fit with this word here. And then the whole song connected with some stuff I had written before. Everything connected for real in a matter of hours, man. I've done the whole demo, sent to Michal, and Michal started working on the drums straight away. And the drum fill intro and the intro for the main riff, when he plays that was a different drum fill that I had thought about before. And then Michal told me, can I work around it? And the song became bigger and bigger, So this is one example of how the process works. When David sent Heavy is the Crown, I liked a lot the riffs, so my idea was just to play around on guitars and hear how it would sound with my distortion here, How cool would that be? And then I had some riff ideas and some things to connect there, and it worked on this direction too. And sometimes I have a lot of riffs and material, spread around I use Logic here to record, so sometimes I enter on Logic and I record 1, 2 riffs, and I save it. And then I don't even remember. And then sometimes I just go to my folder and it's written new stuff, part 3. And then I click there, compare with something I received from the guys, and I said, okay, let's see if we can connect these ideas, So there's many ways to do that, Many, many ways.
Do you kind of have the big picture of the song or the songs kind of floating around in your head in some abstract way to where you'll get an idea given to you by someone and it'll kind of make sense for something you kind of had in mind, and then you go to the DAW and see if you're right or not?
Yeah, sure thing. I do that a lot. And I think that this thing of recording over the internet and sending demos before and changing tracks before we sit down and record the real album. It's just amazing, man, because I like to produce a lot of demo in the song because sometimes you have a riff in mind and you're like, okay, man, this is the new Master of Puppets riff. Let's record this and see how it sounds, you know? And then you record and you listen to it and it's far beyond good, you know? and then you say like, no, it's better to not even send this to the guys. Let's not bother them, you know? So I really like this process of recording and hearing the riffs and, you know, checking how it can become a song. I like to study song structures and many things like that. You know, it's a process that I really enjoy doing, and there's no rule for doing that. You know, there's many ways of doing songs and connecting riffs and, you know, putting the puzzle together. I really like the science of this, you know.
One thing that I think is kind of cool now that I know I'm probably going to be singing more stuff is, you know, when I write, I always try to think about, because we all, you know, do the lip curl as a badass riff, you know, this is cool. But then at some point it's like someone's got to sing over this, right? And, you know, now knowing what our sound is, you know, the first album, you know, there's this old adage, you get your whole life to write your first album and about 9 months to write the second one, right? So now we've carved the sound, right? The die has been cast. We know what the sound of the group is, and we intentionally went really wide on the variety of music on it, which I'll get to that here in a second. But, you know, now knowing also that there's this vocal capability in the band, you know, I think, you know, when I compose, I like to always think about, okay, now here's the verse. What's happening with the singing? You know, what's the vocal melody? What is this? And then sometimes the lyric writes itself. Sometimes it's just a melody. And like Guilherme said, we put a melody and a riff together. You know, the second phase of the writing of this record really happened when we were over at the studios in Germany back in September and October. That was a phase of the writing and recording when we were all together in the room, the three of us. And that was so up to this point, there was, I don't know, 4 or 5 songs that we were all working on over the internet. And then once we got in the room, you know, now there's all kinds of different things. There's body language. There's, you know, how do you read the room? And like we were talking about, Don't Get Mad, Get Even. We had the song and I mentioned, you know, how about we make this like a sports anthem, you know, like kind of a We Will Rock You, like, don't get mad, get even, right? So we worked together to compose that intro to give this, I was thinking kind of UFC and NHL hockey, you know, this kind of rowdy, you know, kind of fucking, you know, thing, sports driven. So we, you know, worked together to compose our intro on that. And then Guilherme brought up, he goes, man, and this is where the body language comes in. He goes, man, you guys, we think about doing a ballad, right? Now, the B word is a very fucking sensitive subject in a fucking super heavy metal band, right? And Guilherme, I remember when you brought it up, it was kind of like, you know, like, am I going to think this guy's going to throw trash and knives at me or what, you know? And I remember it was like, yeah, I mean, what do you got? Let's hear it, you know? And so, you know, it's one thing to send things over the internet. It's another to be in the room and do it. And I'll say for me, singing was probably that, really being in the room and singing and just kind of, because you've only got one voice, you've got one sound, and that's what it is, you know? So Walk With Me Forever was this song that was very personal to Guilherme. And it's interesting how, you know, I just stepped up to the mic to offer a couple of little vocal melody ideas. We're still just working the melody out, to be honest with you. You know, these type of collaborations happened in that phase, which I will call kind of the second phase of the writing and the recording. There was kind of a B and a C studio there, and we worked a lot in the B room. We're working on singing and writing, and Guilherme's producing and cutting and putting things together. So it was like this really productive machine, man. It was like an assembly line. One studio's got this going on, this studio's got that going on. Guilherme's over here editing and doing stuff. So it really became this really fun process where we show up at the warehouse every day, if you will. And it's like, you know, there's just this creativity going on in 3 different rooms of the record.
Out of curiosity, in phase 1, how many of the parts, this is like a 2-parter, but number 1, in phase 1, how definite or final are the parts first of all, and second of all, Guilherme or David, when you send ideas to each other, how arranged are they? Are they just your instrument, or are they like a full band arrangement? Like what do they sound like?
Oh, you take it, G.
Yeah, when I'm on the first phase here, as I told you, I like to do the riffs first and see if they work. Like if I record myself and hear the riff, and the riff is cool enough for me to share with the guys
by itself,
then I move. Yeah, by itself, then I move on. Because usually I have some stuff in mind. And like these days, for instance, I was on the road here on the plane, and I was like, man, I want to write like for the new album. I have some riffs recorded here. I want to have one old school death metal riff to enter a new album, like with the 2 feet at the door, like breaking the door. and then this riff is in my mind here. I'm sure that I'm going to record. And then I like to record one guitar, then I record 2 guitars, then I start to build up the wall. I like to get like drum samples and drum loops and I like to produce the drum sound a little bit for me, because I like to listen to songs that I can headbang to. Because I'm like, man, if you don't like your own music, how are you going to put this out? It's impossible. So first I like to enjoy the process, have some coffee and think like, man, this is cool. And then it depends on how the song is progressing. I throw some demo vocals there, at least some whispering or few lines here and there, and then as much solid as I can get it, then I share with the guys. That's phase 1 for me. So sometimes this takes a week to put a whole idea together and send to the guys, and I like to do some sort of a premix, so people don't get annoyed by getting that super bad sound that you have to struggle to listen to. I like to add some filters, add a little master bus there, so people get a clean, compressed sound that they can identify. 1, 2 guitars, melodies, vocal lines, and drum ideas. So that's my phase 1 process.
Makes sense. So you don't write the initial riff with drums. It's all just the guitar by itself. Then you'll start arranging it and just to see if it actually works. But I guess what I'm curious is, when it comes to writing drum parts, does your drummer rewrite them? Does he write what you played, or does he improve on what you played? Like, how does that work?
It works on all these ways that you mentioned, because some drum parts, sometimes I end up writing here some drums because, as I told you, I want to see the whole thing as the whole picture works together, because sometimes you have a really cool riff, and once you put drums here, I don't know what happens, that it doesn't click, and then you're like, no, so maybe this idea doesn't work. Let me move on to something else, So I like to elaborate as much as I can on drums. It depends on my talent and patience to do that, because I'm not a drummer, so sometimes to dwell too much on that can spoil the whole song. And then I send that to Michal, and maybe Michal has a totally different approach. He knows how to cut grids differently and to count the tempo in other ways, and that adds a lot to the music. And then in some parts, he just sent me messages like, man, can I do something totally different on my side here for this riff? And I gave him the green light totally on that. I said, like, man, I want your soul on these songs so people can notice and they can feel that it's you playing. It's not that I sent you some MIDI drums and you play for the grid just copying it, So we have a lot of back and forth, me and Michal, until we nail like one version of a riff,
Yeah, I feel like I go back and forth because our drummer is so good. You probably know him. It's a dude named Krim. He's unbelievable, and everything gets better once he gets involved. So like there's only so good it's going to get with my drum programming. It's just as soon as he gets involved, I get better ideas and it gets better. But then sometimes there's certain ideas that you need fake drums to really present them properly. Because if like maybe it's a super simple guitar part that is supposed to be more of a vibe or an ambience or something, and without the rhythm, I'm just giving that as an example. Like there's certain ideas that are just, you can't really communicate what's in your head without some sort of a basic guide.
You need something to play for, right? I feel drums like that, I like to have something to play for,
Yeah, I guess the danger is going too far, because when you have a great drummer, you don't want to. When you have a great drummer, it's like you don't want to put too much in their head because you could be limiting a potentially great idea. Like, I try to not get them stuck on some, I give, B plus drum part I wrote when they could come up with an A plus drum part, basically.
Yeah, you can't restrict the guy, right? That there's a thin line there between showing him directions and putting limits to what he can do, right? Restricting him.
Yeah, you got to be careful too, though, because by giving stuff, I've noticed by giving stuff that's too developed, even if you're not trying to restrict somebody, it restricts them just because they get used to it that way, and like that's how they imagine it. So,
I have a cool story for In the Hall of the Hanging Serpents, for example, because I told Michal, it's the first song, so we were still starting to see how it would work, would be. And then I told Michal, like, man, so for this song, for us to not go into the decapitated territory or too much of Old Entombed or something like that, please don't put any blast beat on that part. I know that after the solo, you could put a blast there. And then he just sent me the whole drums recorded, and he said, sorry, man, I put a blast there. But believe me, it works. And when I heard it, it was brilliant. So I thought, like, okay, man, he really knows what he's doing. So, and if I give him some directions, he's not gonna respect 100% at all. So
yeah. Well, and I think too, it's like, I think when the song is sent over, it's more about sending the intention, whether it's me on my iPhone or it's Guilherme sending us, a pretty completed demo. Usually when Guilherme sends me something, says, hey man, here's the song, it's ready for bass, like it's ready for bass. And he'll always send me a video of him playing some of the riffs and stuff, so we don't have to be on the phone all the time going over, is that a C or a C sharp? I can't tell because of the tuning, or it's so fast. What is it? So, so it's, there's an intention. And you're right. I mean, look, we're all three pros. We know what we're doing. Like probably the most direction Guilherme's ever given me. Hey, at this part right here, maybe there's like a little bass break or something. I don't know, maybe do something there, right? And so it's kind of like, okay, let's do something there, right? And it's funny. I listen now as I'm, practicing the songs again for the tour coming up. A lot of the bass breaks are not these big gnarly things. They're these just kind of simple, open, groovy things, which I love because I've spent most of my life just playing a lot of notes. And, I'm done playing a lot of notes if I don't have to play them. You know what I mean? They're fun. And there's times like in Mark of Cain and these things where we're just freaking completely off the chain. But, at the same time, when you're in a big room or a festival or a big setting like that, man, there's power in the simplicity, and I like the idea, and it's fun because we're a three-piece, is that there's room for us to each do separate things and they don't conflict with each other, right? As long as the notes that we're playing are sort of legal within, the scale and that. We can do three different things and have it really be musical. And also we're still playing the same song. So there's been a lot of creativity around that. And I attribute that to being a three-piece.
The simplicity thing, man, it's physics for why it sounds better. But like it really, I really feel like metal, it basically, if you were to just leave metal to its own devices, meaning don't do any mixing, don't do any arranging, like nothing, just leave it the way it sounds when it's just people playing it in a room, it sounds like garbage. Like it sounds like noise. It pretty much is. Like it is noise, like the amount distortion on everything, like screaming, like even if it's singing, it's aggressive, like it's coming at you from all angles, all frequencies, all the time. And you have to make very, very deliberate choices to make it sound good, which, in the arrangement, simplifying bass lines so that the low end has enough time to properly develop and doesn't build on itself. Like,
I found that too in the studio, but especially with a bass, bass takes time. And again, that's why the lower the frequency, you look at PA systems with these folded horns and these reflex systems. It's like, a bass note takes not just time, but feet or meters
distance.
to develop, right? So every time you hit the string, you're essentially killing the previous note that's already expanding, and you sort of shut it off, and then you're starting another one. So it's like it never develops. So, I learned making records years ago. Sometimes you can just play quarter and eighth notes, and G-Man can be sitting there. He can be playing all kinds of gnarly notes, and I can play something really simple, and it really gets big, And of course, we're dealing with the key of C. So from the physics point of view, everything's already pretty temperamental, amplifiers and speakers and strings and everything about it is like already going, what the fuck, and now we're turning it up and hitting it harder. And, and look, at the end of the day, once the vocal starts, that's really the thing that matters, and I'm a big thing with storytelling. What's the story? What is this song about? What's the story? Can we hear what's being told? And especially in this kind of very aggressive style of metal, I'd like to think that both of our voices, we found a chemistry, ironically, as we were making the record, that, these two voices, that we can do this sort of answer call thing to, and say like Free Us All and things like that. We can sort of go back and forth. We can support each other in the choruses, whether it's a chorus I'm singing and Guilherme supports, or I'm jumping in on sort of hitting, things that are more guttural for him. And my voice adds this sort of clarity for the pitch and the words. So, it's a lot of physics, and we've got these different dynamics. It's funny, was we're rehearsing, the band has a pretty clean sound because everybody's a good player and we play really clean, and that's a very different thing than just turning everything up so that it's all just as heavy and dark and shitty sounding as possible. Because the bigger the room, the bigger the PA, the better the equipment, and distortion hides a multitude of sins, of course, and as you sort of clean up your performances, it just translates better, and it makes it something that's makes it easier for people to hear and grasp onto, and especially a new band like this. We're going to be out playing some big shows that, we're the new guys that people probably haven't heard. The art idea is to play, so they go buy the record. They probably don't already own the record, and they're coming to see us play. So for us, it's about, giving them a performance that they can take back to their playlists and add it, because it was like, that was live. That was really good. I like that. Let me add that to my playlist now.
So when you're coming up with those arrangements, and I think that 3-piece, there's a lot of great 3-pieces that have managed to sound enormous. I mean, Muse comes to mind as far as like an enormous sounding 3-piece. But the thing about them is kind of like what you were just saying. It's not just one vocalist. There's one lead vocalist, but it's not just one vocalist. There's multiple vocalists going throughout the whole thing. The bass player isn't just playing a low version of what the guitar is playing. He's playing something different. Like you were just saying, you guys are all able to do something different that still works within the song. So like in reality, it's just 3 humans, but I don't know if your vocalist does. If your drummer does vocals too. So that to me is at least 5 different elements that can be tweaked in the arrangement at the same time. I've definitely noticed that 3-pieces are forced to be more creative because they have to. They got to make the most of it. They don't have 2 guitars to eat up all that space.
Well, there's some songs that are pretty just right off the head, like, To Hell and Back, Don't Go Mad, Get Even, Mark of Cain, these, they kind of what you hear is what you get. And then there's these other moments. Walk With Me Forever, of course, there's a lot of space. And that's something that I think, the more educated you become as a musician, the more mature you become in your craft. You learn how to deal with space and make space matter and make the notes, just the intro is this deliberate build, and it's very ethereal. It's got emotion into just the guitar parts. You haven't even heard a voice yet, and suddenly there's this ambiance that's created. And, I give that to Guilherme. He did that at the beginning of To Hell and Back, also in Severance, and then also in Walk With Me Forever. There's these moments where, clean tone, big space. That's uncomfortable for metalheads. You know what I mean? Because metalheads, fucking turn it up, just drive hard and fast. So they can say, let's just be as noisy as possible to just blur out any consciousness of, emotion, and I think that, with our record, we were able to not only be, really intentional with the heavy stuff, but, we really stepped out and took some chances to do some stuff that, it is really expanding. And I think I personally, I felt great when Guilherme would bring these songs in. I mean, Free Us All, I remember hearing it and I'm going, this is bizarre. There's like this swing, and I used to play in jazz band, and my bad jazz band teacher would always yell at me, go, Ellefson, stop making everything sound like Led Zeppelin. Learn how to swing. Like he was like a real big jazz head. And so I had to just, take the rock and roll hat off and go over to that. So we got Free Us All. Next thing you know, I'm like, well, fuck, I guess walking a bass line seems like the most obvious thing to do here, right? So we're doing that. And then toward the end of it, it's freaking the Allman Brothers. I mean, it's Dickie Betts and Dwayne Allman, and Guilherme's playing all these really cool in memory of Elizabeth Reed kind of guitar parts, and this song is so expanded and live in the room as we're developing it now for the stage. We're going, man, this is one song where this is like our. Instead of Grateful Dead, Grateful Dieth, where we can be really expanded out into really, the song doesn't have to be so literal like it is on the record. We can sort of open it up and riff and expand on this song when we have the time in the set to do so.
Can we talk about those clean parts some? Because, for instance, on To Hell and Back, that's the first thing I heard, actually. And I'm always really impressed by well-written, well-layered, clean parts. It's one of the things I actually like about older metal that kind of disappeared to some degree. So when you're writing those, are they written as part of the song, or are they their own thing, and then you find a place for them? Like, is it built into the song itself from the get-go?
Yeah, man. Actually, I really, really like Stratocaster clean sounds. Like I think that a Strat neck pickup, it's one of the things that always works, and there's nothing better than that for some setups, and there will never be, right? I really, really love that. But the same thing, I love clean neck pickups for humbuckers as well. I think there's something special about that. And if you throw in some reverb, some delay, some atmosphere there, chorus and stuff, it's something that really works. I love that kind of thing, and you nailed it when you said that back in the days in old metal we had that, and even David mentioning Allman Brothers and things like that. I really like the old bands, the old school stuff. I like this to watch some videos here that guys just plug into an amp and the band sounds massive just as they are, And I think that adding dynamics to it, having clean parts and having distorted parts and mixing them and progressing there and having pauses on the right place, I think all of this creates some dynamics to the storytelling, right? So this with the clean parts, it's pretty obvious in my mind when I'm trying to write something. I really like the songs that they're coming blasting and then they stop and then they have like a clear part right there. Black Sabbath, they have a lot of this. I love that Black Sabbath. Sometimes you're hearing a song and then they stop and they go to a direction that makes it totally clean and insane, like Symptoms of the Universe.
Mm-hmm.
That clean part, that acoustic part there, it's genius thing, That song is blasting around, maybe one of the first thrash metal riffs, and then you have all that sonic power, and then it comes to that acoustic part that is just, it blew my mind first time I heard that. But it's what surprises me is that still blows me every time I hear this for the past 30 years. So I enjoy having these clean parts there, especially because I like humbuckers on neck position clean, There's something there that I like to work with. Sometimes I just sit here and put the guitar I put the guitar clean on the neck and I start doing something and it sounds great. And I'm like, okay, so let's do something about it.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like it really is I don't know, underutilized aspect of guitar that has been utilized in previous generations, but there's a clean tone that I hear with modern bands now. It's not that, and I'm not one of these people that's like, oh, everything sucks now, everything was great then. Like, I love a lot of modern music, but there's a specific type of clean tone that I guess younger bands are getting that is very different. It sounds more like you're at a spa. You're at a spa listening to like crystal clear cleans. And I'm not a huge fan of that sound. I really like warmer, highly layered cleans that are kind of in line with what you're talking about. So I really appreciated hearing that. One last thing I wanted to ask you guys about, because I know we're running out of time, is I'm curious about what's your process with ideas that don't make it? Because I know, Guilherme, you're saying you need to be cool with something before you're going to send it off to them. And sometimes you'll write something and then you put drums to it and it's like, not so great. So what I'm wondering is, both on a song level and an individual part level, and I'm wondering for both of you, when something doesn't make it to a song, like say a riff, like it gets cut from a song, is it in the trash forever? Or does that mean just didn't make it in that song? Or like if a song, you finish a song, but then it just doesn't make it to the record for whatever reason, is it dead forever? Like what's your overall philosophy on parts that got cut?
Well, my thought is music is spirit, right? It's energy. That's all it is, right? We don't even come up with it. We're just the channel that flows through us. That's why is it that on any minute you could just pick up your guitar, something comes out, other days nothing comes out, right? And it isn't just about practicing. It's kind of about being available for it to flow through. That's why they call it inspiration, right? So everything's created for a reason. The fact that it didn't make it into a song, it didn't make it on the record, to me just says it's an ingredient you keep on the shelf and there'll be a time to pull it down and add it in. And while it may not have been part of this particular recipe, there's another time and a place for it. And I think, like Guilherme was talking earlier, got these sort of ideas cataloged, as we all do, with folders and folders of ideas with various names on it, Metallica sounding thing, Scorpion sounding thing, Judas Priest riff, whatever we call them, right? Sunday afternoon, May 23rd, 2023, whatever it is, right? It's, and you go back and you listen to them with fresh ears and you go, oh my God, that is so freaking cool. That totally works now with this new part that we're working on. And sometimes things don't always work in the same band. Sometimes you take something and you set it aside and you go, God, this is a really cool part. Definitely not right for this group, but I'll set it over here and maybe some other thing will come along. I had riffs sitting around from a riff tape from Countdown to Extinction from like 1991 or 92 that I used in a band called F5 like 20 years later, and in a drop D tuning, suddenly those ideas 20 years later in a new tuning with a bunch of younger guys, it worked and it was a thing. And, even here, I think I can say that, I have this folder of stuff I had recorded that I sent over to Guilherme. And, again, it's sort of just bubbling on the back burner there. Some of those ideas may work here. Some of them in a new tuning may be perfect. Some of them may just be like, cool idea, not the right setting, and same with lyrics, sometimes there'll be a lyric and a story and you go, man, I'd love to present this to the guys, given in the right context, the right story, the right setting, the right outlet. It's a beautiful story to be told, So a lot of this stuff is, I think, just feeling comfortable with each other to bring it in the room and just go, hey, I don't know if this fits, And again, to be mature enough to go, okay, maybe not now, that it's something that we set aside for another day. And, ultimately for when you're making a record, the best songs win. And they also have to be cohesive and tell the story. I think with To Hell and Back, we really created a narrative that from the needle drop to the end of Severance, you hear, okay, here we are, we're going into hell. Bang, then it hits, and now you're going through this journey, and you're going through all the emotions, and the torments, and all of everything that goes with that. And by the end, you come to Severance, and we titled it Severance. Mihal came up with the name for that because this is it. Now that part is done. We've been to hell. We're back. Goodbye. And now we move on. And I think it sets a nice tone for album number 2 to start. And so. what I love about our band is that it's a story, and it's not just a bunch of random selections of music. It's like it's a masterfully composed. When I played an orchestra band as a tenor saxophone player in high school, there was a movement. Every song is like a movement within a greater symphony, and I'd like to think that that's what we're creating here with this band.
Well said. What about you, Guilherme? What's your take on ideas that don't quite make it?
Man, I agree 100% with David. I don't have even much to add here because he said pretty much what happens in reality when we're writing songs and how they fit together and how they fit into the context. Actually, this folder that David's talking about, some riffs he had. I have this folder here, and some of the songs I already put them together, added some drums. And to be honest, it was a little bit too much for this album because me and Miho, we sit down, we were like, man, to work on 3-4 more songs before we go to Germany, maybe this could be like half or at least 1/3 for the next album. 1/3 of the next album idea is already here in a folder done. So I think it's about having proper time to work on that idea as well,
Yeah.
Because sometimes a simple riff, it can work very well. You listen it with the guitar and it's already there. But sometimes when you put a complete idea, then it makes total sense. If you hear just the guitar, it's just like, okay, so this is just 2-3 notes. But if you listen Roots, Bloody Roots from Sepultura, that's 2 notes, man.
Yeah, it's all context.
But everything together made that thing massive,
Yeah.
It's 2 notes.
Well, and it's funny because when you write a song, I mean, you think about it in the Hall of the Hanging Serpents, that song's like a year and a half old now, right? So we've already written a whole bunch of other songs, but just the time it takes to deliver an album, you promote it, you set it up, you put it out. Now we're going to finally go on tour and go play these songs live. That's the one thing we haven't done yet is play a show. So once you start playing shows, you get an entirely different feel about what works, what doesn't. Sometimes you go, man, this song is great. We should definitely have some more of that on the next record because that really connects with the audience. So that, I'm excited about being together this summer because, Guilherme and I have already, have some plans in our schedule to just open up folder for album number 2 and just start working on it because there's a ton of stuff sitting in there that we've been sending around to each other, lyrics and music and otherwise. And just, look, and it may not even be the right time this summer to get into that mind space. You know what I mean? We may need time away from live shows to just sort of digest and process. And then all of a sudden, one day out of nowhere, the ideas will start flying again. So I think a lot of it is, I'll say this. Gar Samuelson's brother, many years ago, I was over at his house, and this was, early and mid 80s, right? And we were talking about creativity because I was kind of trying to find my own footing, within the band at that time and just kind of as a young, musician. And I'm in California. Everybody seems to have a song and they're creating or something. Everyone's got a script for a movie or something, you know what I mean? And I just felt like, what the hell? I got nothing. What am I doing here? And I remember him saying to me, he goes, I think the deal with creativity is to just start the process and always keep it going, to just always be creating. And man, that was probably the most valuable advice I have ever been given is just keep it going. I have guitars all over the place. I've seen G-Man's apartment. He's got stuff sitting around all the time and on tour, we always got a guitar with us. I usually carry a bass with me pretty much everywhere I go now. And I don't really like writing on bass that much, to be honest with you. I love performing with the bass. I don't really like writing with it as much, but, always just kind of having, I come up with lyrics probably more than anything when I'm traveling. I'm looking out the plane or the window of an airplane or a train or whatever. And just watching the landscape go by, ideas start formulating, or I'm walking around in a hotel room by myself and ideas start coming, or you're at the gym. Doing something, working, and all of a sudden ideas come. And so, I think the thing is just, again, that's why this is my DAW. It's just always capturing. I'll just capture it and put it down. So at least you've captured that moment. And don't ever let any ideas sort of just scatter off into the universe. Just capture them and have them because you never know when you might need them.
I really like the idea of thinking about making songs as cooking good food. Sometimes, man, I think that you have to write something, and I have an expression that is like you let it marinate. You know, like
Yep.
when they prepare the chicken and they leave it on the lemon there for, you know, for a whole night. Sometimes I like to do this with songs. You know, I go until a certain point where my brain is totally fried when I hit the wall with it. And then when I hit the wall of the song, I'm like, okay, so now it's time to let this song rest for 1 week. Next week, when I open it, I'm going to finish that. And usually it works, you know, because it has the proper feeling of marinating the meat. You know, when you open the project again, it's softer. You have more ideas, open more channels. You know, and I really like to get this song and open my microphone here and get some reverb and invert the wave. You know, reverse and stuff. And sometimes I'm doing a song and I just go to my microphone and I do like, and I go there, put a lot of reverb and reverse the track. And then it adds some effects there that make the song happen. I don't know how, but this process of recording the song
It's
and
weird, isn't it?
yeah. But it works, man. Sometimes it just works, you know. So I like to do this kind of little things. It's like putting a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper. You put it on the fridge, and then you put it in the oven, and then you know, there's these little things that adds to the music, you know.
The great thing about working with a DAW as opposed to cooking is you can't undo if you put too much salt.
Playlisting, playlist this shit. You know,
You can't desalt it. So yeah, I think that's good though. No rules, just keep it going. I think that's so true because everyone that I've talked to, you know, throughout my career and also doing these podcasts and then my own personal experience is that the hardest thing is getting started. But once you have momentum, you know, some ideas will be good, some ideas will be great, some ideas will be okay, some will be terrible. But the point is that the more ideas you just keep on putting out there, the more often that you're going to be arriving to those good and great ideas. The less often you do it, basically, I mean, the less often you're going to come up with cool stuff. But guys, I think this is a good place to end it. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to hang out. And I love the band. It's awesome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good chat today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us, man.
Anytime.